What's up and welcome to KplusGaming Corner, and in this Remnant 2 video, I'm sharing my latest status effect build. This one works great on Apocalypse difficulty against both bosses and trash mobs, and an all-around fun way to cruise through and delete everything around you with dots of all flavors. If you like status effect builds and chipping away at enemies while you blast them to tiny little pieces, then this build's for you. So, without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Starting with the archetypes, we're going with the Ritualist as our main class and the Invoker as our secondary. Now, you could probably switch this around if you wanted to double up on your skill usage, but I prefer to have access to the Vile Prime perk, which allows us to have the status effects that we're applying to enemies also apply the infected status, where enemies will be receiving 15% more status effect damage. Plus, and this is key, when those infected enemies die, they spread all their statuses to nearby enemies, so you can keep those dots and the good times going. For the skills, of course we're using Miasma for the Ritualist, and for the Invoker, I've gone back and forth between the Way of Kayula and Way of Maedra. Both work really well with what we have going on, but in the end, I'm sticking with Kayula since it covers a much wider area, and I prefer the damage that those lightning strikes are hitting for, as most enemies are going to be deleted before you even get to them. Although Maedra would give you some healing and lifesteal if you were having some survivability issues and wanted to go a more defensive route. The other good thing about Way of Maedra is with this one, you're increasing elemental damage you're dealing by 15% for enemies around you. The Wrath damage perk is giving us 25% increased damage to enemies affected by any negative status effects, plus some extra crit chance, and Entranced is increasing the elemental damage we're dealing by 15%. Both the archetype traits we're getting are going to be really useful here, since we're getting double the status effect duration with Affliction, and we're getting 30% skill duration with Gifted, making Way of Kayula last a little bit longer so we can get more of those lightning strikes coming down. For the Amulet, while I was using the new Flagrant Thorn a bit, since we're increasing status effect damage and it's allowing us to apply the exposed status onto enemies, giving them an additional 15% damage from all sources, I recently switched to the Sinister Totem, which has also been really useful since we can get up to 50% increased status effect damage with this one. Keep in mind, if you're using Fragrant Thorn, for it to be at its most effective, you need to have 4 or more unique status effects going on an enemy, which works pretty well with Miasma, plus there's mods and mutators you can use with your weapons to get some more status effects out there. If you don't have these amulets, the Energized Net Coil still works really well, although it has been nerfed a bit since it's down to 20% extra status effect damage instead of 25. Plus the explosion only covers half the area it used to, going from 5 meters to 2.5. It's still useful for what it is though. Let me know in the comments if the Energized Net Coil is one that you still enjoy using, or if those nerfs had you toss it in the recycle bin. As mentioned, my preference lately has been the Sinister Totem, since it's really easy to maintain uptime on that 50% status damage increase, since we're constantly refreshing those status effects that we're applying due to all the ways that we can get burn and corrosive and even bleed out there. For the rings, I'm using Shadow of Misery for the 20% increase in status effect damage. Band of the Fanatic is much better now since we're getting a 30% increase to status effect damage, and the duration is only shortened by 50% when it used to be 65%, so not as bad, and most enemies will be gone and deleted before you even notice the shorter status effect duration anyway. We're also counteracting this shorter effect with the Timekeeper's Jewel, which can double the duration of those statuses applied and works really well with the Affliction Ritualist trait that I mentioned, basically giving a 200% increase in total. So again, this helps to mitigate any negative effect of the Band of the Fanatic, so in the end, we're coming out ahead. You're going to want the Ahani Crystal in any status effect build due to its crazy damage increase potential, which is back up to 5% after the latest hotfix. It had been nerfed to 4%, so definitely glad they reversed that one. Since this is a ring you get from hardcore mode, and some of you might not have that one, Red Ring of Death could be a good alternative since it duplicates the last damaging status effect applied, but at the cost of some of that status effect damage. The Alumni Ring increases all elemental damage by 10%, and the new Black Spinal Ring can be an option for defense if you need it, since with this one you can heal yourself as you're applying those status effects, which is great if you're having trouble with a particular area or boss fight and you're running around on Nightmare or Apocalypse. The weapons you use in a lot of my builds are pretty flexible, and I know a lot of people would probably decide on going with something like the Sparkfire Shotgun since it naturally applies the burning status, or the Nebula, which is spraying acid and corrosive around. All good choices, but at the moment I'm going with the simple Black Maw AR-47 with the corrosive rounds mod, great for getting that status effect on enemies, which is causing them to also take on more damage. Plus we're increasing crit chance, which feeds into the Searing Wounds mutator, where crit hits and weak spot hits are applying the burn current status. And we're constantly refreshing these statuses on enemies, which works great with the Sinister Totem Amulet that I mentioned, helping to maintain that 50% extra status damage pretty effectively. I have the Scrap Shot mod on my handgun to get some bleed and the slow status out there, and the Mutator on here is flexible. I have on Vetted Wounds at the moment, but could easily have gone with Twisting Wounds instead, so feel free to play around with those and go with whichever you like best. I have the Krell Axe for my melee weapon in case I need it. Also a good way to get some shock damage going, but the Gas Giant or the new Crystal Staff could be some others to consider. For the relics, I'm back to my favorite one, the Salvaged Heart, for the increased use speed, and for the fragments I have some extra elemental damage, some extra mod duration, and then some extra crit chance which helps with the mutators. You can probably swap out the mod duration with something like skill duration or skill cooldown if you want. I just like having my corrosive rounds active a little longer, just my personal preference. This is how my trait points are set up. As usual, this is pretty flexible and open to switch around as you please. I like going with amplitude in this build so our skills as well as the Vile Prime perk can cover a wider area, and then I'm fully spec'd into Chakra for some more mod duration. So there you have it, that's the build. You're a vile spirit of pain infecting all enemies with enough statuses and dots to quickly bring down even the toughest of foes on Apocalypse difficulty. Let me know down below if you're running something similar and how you have yours set up, or if you have any questions on where to find some of the rings, amulets, or mutators that I mentioned. Thanks so much for watching if you made it this far, and do give this video a like and a thumbs up if you haven't already. It helps with those algorithms to push us out to more of us who are looking for new ideas on how to put some of their builds together, and also to new players to the game that might be looking for some help. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell to make sure you're getting all the updates on when I'm going live or dropping new videos. I love you guys. Thanks again for all your support. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Until then, peace.